Can you do any better on the price? How many times have you heard that question before? You see, this is the moment in almost every sales conversation where the entire deal quietly hangs in the balance. And it's in that moment that most sellers unknowingly do one of two things. And you're probably going to nod your head as I say this. Number one, they either give away margin, losing that profit, or you give away trust. And oftentimes you end up losing both margin and trust. But what if I told you there's a way to respond that doesn't lose margin and doesn't lose trust? What if I told you there's a single communication move that can actually increase confidence? Yeah, and move the deal forward without sounding defensive or rigid or salesy or completely unconfident. In this video, I'm going to show you why buyers really ask this question, and we're going to look at some of the exact words and questions confident sellers, or pathfinders as we like to call them, use in response. And we're also going to do somewhat of a role play that shows you how this moment can either collapse or convert. And you want to convert, y'all. We want to make some magic. So if you've ever discounted when you didn't want to or felt awkward defending your price, this is a career builder, this video, if you watch to the end, y'all. Hey friends, my name is Marcus Sheridan. I'm a keynote speaker, an author on sales, marketing, and leadership communication. I want to welcome you to the channel, The Confident Communicator. This is where leaders and sellers learn how to own the room. That's right, let's own it and create breakthrough conversations every single time. And hopefully we can have some fun doing it. All right, let's break it down. When a buyer asks, can you do any better on the price? Here's what they're actually saying. They're not saying you're too expensive. They're saying one of three things. Number one, they could be saying here, I'm just not fully convinced yet. Number two, they might be saying, well, I'm actually comparing you to someone else. Or number three, they're just saying, look, I'm trying to reduce risk. And so this is really important because price pressure from the buyer, it's almost always about clarity. You have to seek clarity. Clarity is your key here. That is your goal. And the moment you treat this like it's a negotiation instead of what it really is, which is a communication problem, you're going to lose authority. And we do not want that to happen. So confident communicators, they don't negotiate first. They diagnose first. That's what we're trying to do. Your obsession has to be, I've got to figure out what's really going on here. I've got to diagnose first. So always diagnose over thinking, I've got to negotiate. You don't need to negotiate in this moment. So let's be further clear on what not to do. All right. Number one, and we, as we're training sales leaders and CEOs around the world, when it comes to the sales side of it, the number one issue we see when folks get asked this question is they start discounting immediately. I mean, you've heard this before. They'll say something like, let me see what I can do, or all right, I might be able to sharpen the pencil. If someone says this, and then the first words out of your mouth are, well, let me see what I can do. What is the message that sends? The message is that the price was completely arbitrary. It was like in the clouds. It didn't actually mean anything. Now, the second mistake that we oftentimes see when we're looking at these call reviews is a defensive justification on the part of the seller. So this means they start talking faster, they're listing features, they're over-explaining value, and that just tells the buyer, you ain't sure. You are not at all confident in what you're really trying to say. So remember, neither of these two protects margins and neither of them builds trust. So what do you need to do? What's the core play here? What's the core move? So when a buyer asks for a better price, as you know, if you've watched any of our videos, you do not answer immediately. Instead, you always want to slow the moment down. You want to ask a question like this. Now, one of the things we teach is what we call the pushback pivot. That's when you take the negative word or words that were presented to you and you repeat them and you ask the person to explain it. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but somebody says to you, okay, so can you give me a better price? You say, okay, well, that's a fair question. When you say better price, can you help me understand what's driving that question for you? Everybody got it? that's a fair question. When you say better price, can you help me understand what's driving that question for you? Now, notice that I maintain the right look, the right energy, the right smile. This is a really big part of this. When you ask this question, it does 4 things. Number 1, it just buys you time. So often when we respond with resistance by asking a question, we're just allowing ourselves to slow the moment down so that we can think more clearly and really collect our thoughts, what we want to say next. Now, not only does it buy you time though, but it shifts the power, because the moment the person says, can you do better? Can you give me a better price? If you start to just respond, you're losing all the power, you're losing all the authority. And so it shifts the authority back to you. It also invites honesty, which is a big deal. If you've watched any of our other videos, we talk about how to initiate every sales conversation with extreme honesty through what we call the honest agreement. But you want to re-invite honesty throughout the sales conversation. That's what this sentence does. And of course, it forces clarity. Again, that's what we're going after here. We're trying to find out what's really going on. And so just to repeat this question one more time, that's a fair question. So when you say better price, can you help me understand what's driving that question for you? All right, now let me show you what this might look like in a role play setting. And let's or demo really, because it's not really role playing per se here, because you're not with me and I'm all alone. Let's do it like a demo. And this is the wrong way. So the buyer says to you, so can you do any better on the price? And you say, yeah, maybe, let me see what I can do. We really want to earn your business. Cut. No bueno. Here's what the buyer just learned, that your price is flexible, that value, how you've been presenting it, is totally negotiable, and that pressuring you works. This is wild, right? They've like, I can pressure this person. So the rep didn't lose margin because of the buyer. They're getting ready to lose it because of how they responded, right? So if you want to become a pathfinder, if you want to be that confident communicator, buyer says to you, so can you do any better on the price? You say, okay, well, that's a fair question. So when you say better price, help me understand what's driving that question for you. Now there's just like pause. There's silence. Now you've just going to let them think about it. Now they're going to say different things. So let's look at some of the different things they might say. So let's say the buyer says, well, we were hoping to be closer to $80,000. Like, that was our overall budget. Now you're going to say, okay, $80,000. Got it. So when you think about that number, what were you assuming would be included in that price? See what we just did there? When you think about that number, what were you assuming would be included in that price? Now, again, what we're forcing the buyer to do here is explain themselves. Now, let's assume that the buyer says, well, we assume that it would pretty much include everything. Now, once again, we're not going to be thrown off. We're going to say, all right, so that helps. So if budget is the limiter here, we can look at adjusting scope, but not the value. Would you like to explore that? What we've done is we're going to shift from saying, all right, so if we've got a budget issue and that's clearly a limiter, what we want to do is we want to look at adjusting scope, not the value. Would you like to explore that? So now they're able to say, okay, so we're gonna essentially get to a place where we're able to say, all right, here's what we know you wanted. Here's what your budget allows when we change the scope. And we can look at those two things together. And you always want to get to a place where you're comparing them together so they can make a choice between the two. So let's say the person, after you ask them what was driving the question, they say, well, to be honest with you, another company came in lower. You might say, okay, came in lower. Can you help me understand what you mean by that? So just simply by getting them to explain came in lower, and they're going to, say a few things here. They're going to give you some responses, at which point you're able to say, so when you compare the two companies and the two options, what feels different between us and them? Now, this is a really, really powerful question, all right? So you've asked them to explain. The person says, hey, another company came in lower. You say, okay, use the pushback pivot. When it came in, when you say lower, can you help me understand what that looks like? And they say, well, they were here and here. And you say, okay, well, that makes sense. When you compare the two options, what feels different between us and them? Now, we're going to start to get to the crux. They might say something like, well, the warranty in the install process. So once again, we don't want to assume we know what they mean. We want to make them explain explain it. So when you say warranty and install process, help me understand better the differences between those two. Now, once they explain the differences, now you're able to say, so if those differences matter long-term, does price still feel like the main concern, or is it really about reducing the risk? So, for example, if we are able to discover that your warranty is better and that they see that you have a different install process, but your pricing is higher. Now we've gotten to the point where we've essentially been able to put the two different, post them against each other. We got the pricing option, right? But we've got the option with the warranty and the install process. So we're able to say things like, so if warranty and install process, if they matter to you long-term, does price still feel like the main concern, or is it really about reducing risk here? Now, the person is going to make the choice between the two, and that's where we always want to go. We want to help them make the choice between the two. So let's say, once again, they say to you, okay, can you do any better on price? And we get them to explain themselves. And they say, well, we're just seeing if there's, flexibility. At that point, you can say, okay, that's totally fair. What part of the value still feels uncertain or not fully justified yet? This is really going to put the onus back on them to say, well, I don't feel like you're giving me a good value, or, well, truth be told, I feel like you're giving me a good value. But let's repeat the question. It's totally fair, but what part of the value still feels uncertain to you or not fully justified yet? Forcing clarity. This one's super, super powerful. Let's be hypothetical. Let's say they said something like, well, we're worried about delays. So once again, when you say delays, help me understand what you mean by that. They explain it, and then we're able to say, all right, so that's helpful. Let's talk through how we prevent that, and then we can decide if this still makes sense. Sound fair? Now we're able to explain, and then once we do that, we're able to say, of course, something like, has that resolved your concern about delays, or do you still feel delays is a primary concern here? All right, we got it? Now, here's one last thing I'll say about this. Because some of you are saying, well, what if I do adjust the price? It cannot be automatic. This is the biggest key to a price negotiation. You're never just giving without receiving. So it has to be an exchange. So don't be just a giver, be an exchanger. We never just want to give, we want to exchange. This is why you would say something like, so if we did adjust the price, it would mean changing the scope or the timing. Which matters more to you? You see what we did there? We said, well, if we're going to do this, then it would mean this or this. And it's always better if you can give two choices in terms of what they're going to sacrifice, what they're going to give up, what they're going to exchange in this case. And then we're able to say, so which one matters more to you? And that, by doing this, you're going to maintain your authority, and they're going to be much less likely to try to what is essentially negotiate this out. All right. Now, remember, as is always the case, one of the biggest keys to this is you got to have the right tone. Tone is such a big deal. I mean, if you notice, I'm doing this with you right now, but you just want to have just a relaxed frame and style. It shouldn't be climactic, these things. It shouldn't be like they just asked a question that was so deep and just changes the energy of the room. I mean, if you understand the principle of yes and, like we teach at Question First Group, it's maintaining that perfect energy. What does the moment call for? So not only that, but make sure you're slowing down during these moments. Do not speed up. There's a major tendency to speed up. Lower your voice to bring the calm in. Say less. Be incisive with your questions. Allow silence to work the magic for you. Remember, buyers trust the calm seller. This doesn't mean you don't have great energy, but they trust calm over eager. By being calm yourself, they're going to receive that energy, and they're going to have a stronger sense of calm. But if you're eager, they're going to be eager. So when all said and done, when the buyer asks for a better price, remember, they're not attacking you. This is a question of clarity, of confidence, and of leadership. And the way you respond teaches them exactly how to treat the value that you've given them. So don't defend price. Nope, you're a pathfinder. You guide them to the decision. As always, if you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, I hope you subscribe to the channel, that you're a part of this community, that you leave a comment and let us know your thoughts, and let us know especially if you applied any of it and if it made any impact on your career to be the best seller you can be. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with me. And until the next time, continue on your path to becoming that special Pathfinder.